Okay. Good morning, everyone, and a very special Happy Mother's Day. Today we wish Happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers, and we have a tradition among the monks in India to look upon all women as mother. So we can also wish a Happy Mother's Day even to the little girls and to women of all ages. It's a very wonderful thing, beautiful thing to see sometimes a very old monk approaching a very little girl with folded hands and calling her Mataji or Ma. So we wish all of you a very happy Mother's Day. It's going to be bittersweet for many of you. We know because of all this separation and not being able to be with family all the time. But we hope that with all the technology, you can at least have some virtual contact with everyone, and that it'll be a very sweet and wonderful Mother's Day. So I thought today I would not speak on any deep philosophical Vedantic issues. I would speak on motherhood. So the talk this morning is called the Ode to Motherhood, and as I say, it's addressed to all the mothers, all the women. Our way of expressing our tremendous gratitude for all that mothers have done for us, because whether monks or lay people, men or women, we've all been given birth to by mothers. So we have a great debt of gratitude that we owe to all of them. They've carried us in their wombs, they've nursed us when we were little, they've washed us, cleaned our diapers when we were absolutely helpless. They've done everything for us. They had to go through months of labor pains and morning sickness and nausea and all sorts of different things, and all out of love, without any feeling that this is a terrible burden or anything. So it really is a very wonderful thing when we think what mothers have done for all of us. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna always pointed to the love that the mother has for the small child, for the infant, as the highest example of selfless love, because the small infant can't even express love back to the mother. The mother does it simply out of love, not expecting anything in return. This is one of the attitudes that we find called Vatsalya Bhava, and that's exemplified by Mother Yashoda for the baby Gopala, the baby Krishna, and the perfect example of a love that seeks nothing in return, just out of pure love to serve the child. So this is one of the ways that we can actually worship God, by emulating the selflessness that the mother has for the small child. This is called ahetuki bhakti, this motiveless love. And no thought of other loves, we want to be loved in return, or we want some sense of gratitude or reciprocity, something in return. But this type of love, just the mother is content to shower love on the child because it's her own child. The other attitude, similar attitude, which we find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, is called Shantan Bhav, Santana Bhava, the attitude that the child has towards the mother. So God can also be worshipped that way. We look upon God as our very own mother. And of course, in the vice versa, we can look upon our mother as God also. But this is an attitude that Sri Ramakrishna had as a more or less lifelong devotee of Mother Kali and other forms of the Divine Mother. This was the attitude that was really his the one that came back each time after all of his different types of spiritual practices. He always returned to this attitude of the child relying fully on the mother. And part of this attitude has to do with the helplessness of the child. It's not really the infant, but a little bit older, depending entirely on the mother. Whatever the mother says, that's what the child feels is best. The world begins and ends with the mother. So this is that other attitude. We have both of these, is Vatsalya Bhava and the Santan Bhava. The status of motherhood in India has been raised to the point that we don't find in other traditions. And I don't mean here spiritually, I just mean the role of the mother, that the mother plays in society. That we see it, of course, from the spiritual point of view, where God is worshipped as the Divine Mother. There may be some other traditions where we find a little glimpse of this. Mother Mary is held in the highest reverence in Christianity, but we don't find anything to equal this, the prominence of worshiping God as Mother. We see it especially in Bengal with the worship of Kali and Durga, but we see it in all parts of India. In the south, we'll see with the Lalita, Tripura Sundari, in the north, worship of Durga, Parvati, Annapurna. Wherever there's worship of Shiva, we'll find the consort there also. But especially in social relations, the importance of the mother in the Indian setting is paramount. It's something very special. Swami Vivekananda was very fond of saying that in the West, the ideal for women is the wife, but in India, it's the mother. And he spoke about this many times. He said the ideal womanhood of India is motherhood, that marvelous, unselfish, all-suffering, ever-forgiving mother. The highest of all feminine types in India is mother, higher than wife. Wife and children may desert a man, but his mother never. Mother is the same, or loves her child perhaps a little more. Mother represents colorless love that knows no barter. Love that never dies. Who can have such love? Only mother, not son, nor daughter, nor wife. Then he quotes, I am the power that manifests everywhere, says the mother. She who is bringing out this universe, and she who is bringing forth the following destruction. And then again he says, the ideal woman in India is the mother first, and the mother last. The word woman calls up to the mind of the Hindu motherhood, and God is called mother. As children, every day when we are boys, we have to go early in the morning with a little cup of water and place it before the mother. And mother dips her toe into it and we drink it. In the West, the woman is wife. The idea of womanhood is concentrated there as the wife. To the ordinary man in India, the whole force of womanhood is concentrated in motherhood. In the Western home, the wife rules. In an Indian home, the mother rules. So this special relationship is there. I would say, this may be my own bias, but between the mother and the son. And there, of course, are social reasons for this. The son will live in the house, traditionally, of the parents, whereas the daughter, she'll move and she'll live in the house of her in-laws. So if it's a poor family and it's a little far away, she may not see her own mother, except when she can go back for visits. We know with the story of Durga how she's sent off to the Himalayas to marry Shiva, and once a year she'll come back. And this is our worship of Durga Puja in Bengal. So this relationship between the son and the mother is something that'll be a lifelong thing as long as the mother lives. And second thing is that, and we'll see with the examples that I give, it was also not uncommon for the marriage to be arranged between the husband who was quite a bit older than the wife. So very often the wife was a widow by the time the son was older, so he had that special obligation to look after her that way. So, with no offense to the men, because we also value you, but there's this special reverence to women in the whole Indian tradition. When we read the Taittiriya Upanishad, Swami Brahmarupananda, he gave a nice kind of preview to my talk this morning when he talked about this Matri Devo Bhava. We have these first two instructions to the graduating class of students, Matri Devo Bhava, Pitri Devo Bhava. Look upon your mother as God, look upon your father as God. But which one comes first? Mother. Look upon your mother as God comes first. When Swami Vivekananda addressed the audience at the Parliament of Religions, he didn't say brothers and sisters of America. He said, sisters and brothers of America. So first place always goes to the women. I remember this was in 1979. I had decided, I was in India, and I had decided to join the order. And I was visiting our ashram in Vrindavan. There was one of the senior swamis of our order who was held in the highest esteem. There's Gopesh Maharaj, Swami Sardeshanandaji. He was a disciple and attendant of Holy Mother for many years. And I met with him and I asked for his blessings to join the order. And he only asked me one question. He said, is there someone to look after your mother? And I said, yes, Maharaj, she'll be taken care of. Everything's okay. She won't suffer if I join. And then he smiled and he said, all right. So that was the one question that he himself asked. So the obligation or duty, responsibility of the child is a lifelong responsibility. There's one exception. The traditional exception is for those who renounce the world, who become monks or nuns and take sannyasa. From the Orthodox point of view, the ties are broken. That now there's no obligation, and traditionally the sannyasin would not even go home until maybe 12 years later. There's one tradition at least, that after 12 years they would go home and visit the family once and then leave. We see this actually in the life of Swami Vivekananda's grandfather. His grandfather, after the birth of one son, who of course was Swami Vivekananda's father, after the birth of a son, on some level had filled enough of an obligation that if he felt the tremendous call to become a monk, he could leave home. So he did. He became a monk at that time. And according to the tradition, after 12 years, because they didn't know, he just left. Nobody knew where he was or anything about him. And in those days, very often the family would search and try to find him and bring him back home and force him to stay within the family life and everything. But after 12 years, he came to visit the family once, to see his wife once, and they caught hold of him. And they more or less locked him in his room and didn't want him to leave. And so he sat there in meditation and didn't take any food or anything. And they saw, what is the point? That he's probably going to just give up his life if we keep him like this. So they left the door unlocked, and quietly he left one day. So this was the Orthodox tradition that the monk is free from all obligations, even the funeral rites. Shraddha, not only doesn't he have to, he's not allowed to. So part of the sannyas ceremony is to do these things in advance, and then whatever else has to be done, someone else will do it. There's a nice, and don't get too upset because we don't follow all of these things in our order. This is the whole point of, but just to show you this spirit of the monk, that who was mother and who was father to the monk. I want to tell a nice story about Latu Maharaj. Latu Maharaj, you know, was the one monastic disciple who was uneducated. He was an orphan boy. Swami Atmajnanananda. He was an orphan boy, and when he came to Sri Ramakrishna, he was given free access to Holy Mother because he was younger, and she needed someone to help, so he did chores for her. He helped her roll chapatis and things like that. So he became very, very close to Holy Mother. And it was only Latu Maharaj and Swami Advaitananda, the Borda Gopal, because he was much older, that Holy Mother didn't have to remain veiled and was a little free in front of them. So he had this tremendous devotion to Holy Mother. Now one day he was staying in Balaram Bosa's house, and Holy Mother was staying upstairs. And she was about to leave for Janambati. And everyone came, and they bowed down before her. They took leave of her. They said, Mother, please come back quickly, all of that. But Latu Maharaj, he remained in his room. And everyone's wondering, where is Latu Maharaj? Well, he loves Holy Mother so much, and he's just staying in his room. And they saw that he was pacing back and forth in his room, muttering to himself, who is mother or father to a monk? He is free from all attachment and maya. So this is what he was saying. But what was he feeling? And then, because we see that after this, they went and told the Holy Mother that, look, Latu Maharaj is going back and forth. He's saying this and everything. So she came outside his door and said to him, "My child, it is all right if you don't accept me." Immediately, Latu Maharaj ran from the room, fell down at Holy Mother's feet, and began weeping uncontrollably. And Holy Mother also began to weep. And then Latu Maharaj, he took the corner of his cloth and started to wipe the tears from Holy Mother's eyes. A very beautiful scene. And then very sweetly he said to her, "You are going to your father's home. Please don't weep. You will return soon." Now, I'm mentioning this story for two reasons. One, to show this traditional idea, but also to show that it's not a hard and fast rule, and it was broken by some of the greatest sannyasins in the history of India, and a little bit of a secret that open secret that many people know and many people don't know, but many of our sadhus also kept some contact and connection with their mothers and other family members. So in this case, it was a Holy Mother who really was his surrogate mother, because, as I say, he was an orphan boy. So he grew up without his biological mother there, so Holy Mother was the same. But I want to point to a few examples, and again, these were briefly mentioned by Swami Brahmarupanandaji in his talk in the Taittiriya Upanishad. 3 or 4 of the greatest renunciates that we can think of: Shankaracharya, Chaitanya Deva, and of course Ramakrishna and Swamiji himself. So I want to just give the examples as my ode to motherhood of this very special relationship we find between the son and the mother in these 4 great souls. And we'll see another interesting commenting, how they were all widows at the time, how the father had already passed away. In Shankaracharya's case, his father had passed away when Shankara was just a boy. And so this means that there were no other sons. He was the only son, and perhaps because of the death of the father, because this happens in almost every case, for a young person, the death of a beloved family member will bring some feeling of renunciation, dispassion, that how much joy is there in this world. So perhaps partly because of that, and it happened again with all of the others, he developed a feeling of intense renunciation. He was very young at the time, but he was the only son, and how to ask his mother for permission to renounce the world. In those days it meant that he would wander, and probably she would see him maybe, as I said before, after 12 years or something like that. And second thing is, there was no one to carry on the family line. The father was dead, so there will be no more children, and he was the only son. But he had no interest in any of these things, and he wanted to be a sannyasin. And as he was so devoted to his mother, he wouldn't do it without her consent. Now, there's a story that we hear, and if you go to Kaladi, this is the birthplace of Shankaracharya, there's a little memorial place there, and you can go to the river, and you can see exactly where all of this took place. That he was bathing in the river one day as a boy, and a crocodile came and caught hold of his leg, and death seemed inevitable. So there's something called apat sannyasa, that if one is in great danger, or if death is imminent at the end of life, then without going through any ritual or anything, you can take sannyasa, so you die as a sannyasi, because it's considered a very auspicious type of death. So he prayed to his mother, "Mother, please, you see I'm about to die. Allow me this opportunity to take this vow of sannyasa, this apat sannyasa, so that at least I'll die as a monk." So the mother agreed. Then as soon as she agreed, the crocodile let go and swam off. There's some trick of the divine was at play here. But anyhow, she had granted it and he had taken it. There was no going back. So he was already a sannyasi, but he consoled his mother by promising to be at her side at the final moment. And there's something that every son will do, but a sannyasi is not supposed to do. And so this was actually forbidden by the very orthodox tradition, but must have been a great consolation to his mother. Because Shankaracharya, he had tremendous work to do. He was born with a certain mission. He revived Hinduism. He not only established the Advaita Vedanta on the firmest footings, but went all over India. He started the whole monastic tradition, the Dashanami tradition. He revived temple worship. He wrote so many hymns and poems and everything, commentaries on the Upanishads and Gita and Brahma Sutra, that he was born for that. So he had this mission in life to accomplish. But at the same time, he remembered his vow and had some presentiment that his mother was not well, and went back and got there in time when she was on her deathbed, and himself built the funeral pyre and performed the final rites, and was very much criticized for this by the orthodox sannyasins, but he did it anyhow. So this was a Shankaracharya. Then we get to Chaitanya Deva, and it becomes a more heart-wrenching story with regard to his mother. Shachi Devi was born in a place called Jaipur Hat in East Bengal. I mention this because I visited that place. It's a tiny little village and a very small little temple there. And they had some ceremony there when I was there. And just they had a plain wooden chair with a picture of her on it. And they did some puja and everything. And I spoke to the people there. There were about a half a dozen people and a few cows that were there. I don't know who was more curious, the people or the cows. But I remember that. So Chaitanya Deva was actually Saleti. His parents were both Father Dhaka Dokin from that area. Anyhow, this is beside the point. But there are so many beautiful songs and stories have been written about the sannyasa of Chaitanya Deva, Nimai Sannyas. And in Bengal, when this jatra is performed, these kirtans are performed, someone will recite and sing all of this. People will be weeping. It's a very sad thing when they think of the condition of Chaitanya Deva's mother. Because he was born the last of 10 children, and 8 of them had died already, mostly in childhood. And there was only one remaining older brother to Chaitanya Deva, and he had already become a monk. He had left. So here this old widow was there. Her husband, of course, had died earlier. This old widow was there, and the only son left, 24 years old, Chaitanya Deva, wants to become a monk. How does he go to his mother and tell her that? But the same thing, the urge to renounce was so strong, and this feeling that he had a mission to accomplish. These great souls, they have some feeling. It may not be very clear at the time, but that they're born for a special purpose. So he knew that. And but this urge came to renounce. Before, he was a very proud Pandit, and very hostile, antagonistic to any of the so-called religious people in that town where he lived. There were others, Advaitacharya and others, who would go about doing kirtan and everything, and they were scared to death of him. He would come and he would laugh at them and make fun of them and everything. So very proud and haughty. But after his father died, the same thing. After his father died, he went to Gaya, which is the same place where Thakur's father went and had that vision that he would be born there. He went there to do the funeral rites for his father, and happened to meet a wandering monk by the name of Ishwar Puri. And some revolution took place, just through the holy company, through the touch of this holy man. And he was completely transformed. He was initiated, and he came back, and of course, very quickly became the center of attraction and the leader of the Vaishnava community there. So at the age of 24, he felt that whatever he was doing was not enough. He had to formally renounce the world if he wanted to have any influence, and if he wanted to feel that desire to renounce everything for God. So how to tell the mother again that he was the only one left. So with great humility and great reverence towards his mother and great yearning for realization, before he would take the plunge into monastic life, he begged his mother for permission and promised her that he would always be available to her, that she could see him, so he would grant her the vision from time to time, and that he would live in Puri. Puri was the most sacred place at that time for the worshippers of Krishna, but it was also not so far that the local devotees of the Bengali devotees could go back and forth. So he said, you'll always get news of me through all of the other devotees. So this was his reverence and love for his mother. Now, when we get to Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, everything, it goes up a notch. This devotion to mother becomes stronger and stronger. Sri Ramakrishna's mother was named Chandramani Devi, and she was a very simple, pious village woman. Just as actually Sri Ramakrishna is a very simple, pious villager, with a very loving mother's heart. She looked after the worship of Raghuvir in their home. He was the family deity, and she looked upon him as her own child. So she also had that Vatsalya Bhava. And when her husband, before Sri Ramakrishna was born, went to Gaya and had that vision of Godadhar. Godadhar is the presiding deity of Gaya, Gaya, and name of Vishnu, that he would be born in their family. This was just before Sri Ramakrishna was born. When he went back, he found that Chandra Devi had also had a dream. She told her husband, listen, when you went to Gaya, one night I had a wonderful dream. I saw a luminous being lying on my bed. First I thought it was you. Then I realized that no human being could have that kind of beauty. When I awoke, I found that being was still in the bed. Then she went on to say she thought it may have been a divine being, or maybe a thief. She was very guileless. Or someone she had a trifling quarrel with a few days earlier. When she told this to her friends, of course they laughed at her. She was very, very simple and said, look, you had a dream. It wasn't anything else. And then they said, don't tell anybody else. They think that you're going senile. But when she told her husband, he had a different reaction. She told him, also another day, I was standing in front of the Jugi Shiva temple. There's a little temple right outside the compound where they lived. And talking with Dhani, Lokat's village friend, she's the one who gave alms to Sri Ramakrishna after a sacred thread ceremony. So I was talking with her. Suddenly, I saw a divine light emanating from the image of Shiva. It filled the temple and rushed toward me like a wave. Stupefied with fear and wonder, I fell unconscious. Later, when I regained consciousness, with Dhani's help, I told her my experience. At first, she was amazed, but then she said, you had an epileptic fit. From then on, I have had the feeling that the light is still on in my womb and that I am pregnant. When I mentioned this to Dhani and Prasanna, they scolded me and called me foolish, mad, and so on. Well, what do you think about it? Addressing her husband. Did I have that vision by God's grace, or was it all a delusion? Even now I feel that I am with child. Ultimately, Chandra Devi came to live in Dakshineshwar with Sri Ramakrishna. This was after her husband died. Both of her other sons had passed away. And so she was all alone, more or less, and wanted to be with her dear son, Ramakrishna. So she came to live with him at Dakshineshwar. In addition to this, that she heard rumors in Kamarpukur that her son had become mad. This was because he was going through this period of divine madness and behaving in a way that no one could understand. He was rolling on the ground, calling for mother, and dressing like a Hanuman, a monkey, and hopping from place to place. He went through all of these very unique types of spiritual practices that an ordinary person won't understand, so everyone assumed he was mad. So before that, they brought him to Kamarpukur. They arranged for his marriage and everything. And after that, he went back and resumed again with this type of divine madness. So Chandra Devi, she had no interest in anything else. And she heard that he was going through this difficult period. So she moved there and spent her last 12 years on the banks of the Ganges. This is from 1864 to 1876. Mathur Babu was still alive then. He was the patron. He's the one who looked after everything and supplied Sri Ramakrishna with whatever he wanted. So he made arrangements for her. He loved her very much. He called her Granny. He would visit her every day. Thakur would also visit her every day and spend some time talking to her and talking about the old days in Kamarpukur and feeding her and everything else. So the Mathur Babu, one day, he wanted to do something. He was always trying to serve. He had a great desire to act, if he could have, to lavish gifts on Sri Ramakrishna, who wouldn't accept anything. He couldn't accept money. He didn't like possessions, anything. So we thought, well, maybe I can serve his mother. So he went to her one day and said, I have a great desire to get something for you. The money is not an issue. He asked for anything that you want. So the old lady thought and thought and thought, and then she said, I have everything I need. I can't think of anything that I would want that I don't already have. Then he said, please think of something. So she said, all right. If you can buy me a paisa, a little bit of tobacco, that I can burn this tobacco, make an ash, and use that to clean my teeth. This was a village method of cleaning the teeth. So Mathur Babu was very touched to see her simplicity. And he said, only such a mother could have given birth to such an all-renouncing son as Sri Ramakrishna. Now we'll get many examples of Thakur's love for his mother. When Totapuri came to Dakshineshwar, he was the bold sannyasin who was to teach Ramakrishna this Advaita Vedanta. And he met Sri Ramakrishna and told him, yes, I will initiate you into Vedanta, but you have to take vows of sannyasa. Now, in those days, and even today to a large extent, if a mother heard that her son was going to be a sannyasi, she would feel as if he had died, that she wouldn't see him again. So he said, he agreed. First he had to get permission from the Divine Mother. He went to the temple, but then he said, but one thing, actually two things. He said, one, I'm married. He said, in your case, it doesn't matter. You and your wife aren't living as husband and wife anyhow, so it doesn't matter. But the second thing he said, my mother will be very hurt if she comes to know that I've taken the vows of sannyasa, I become a monk. So we'll do everything in secret. And of course, after that, he never wore Nagarawa. So as far as we know, his mother probably never knew that he took sannyasa vows. Probably a lot of people didn't know, because he never talked about it. He never dressed like a sannyasin. He didn't take any Swami name or anything like that. So this is what happened. Totapuri agreed, and he never wore any of the signs. Of course, partly because he belonged to that class of monks called Paramahamsas, who generally don't bother about any outward signs of anything. There's another beautiful scene that we think about more in terms of the Holy Mother, but very significant for Thakur's mother also. One day, Holy Mother was sitting with Sri Ramakrishna, massaging his feet, and she looked at him and said, how do you look upon me? Because here, she's his wife. She's also his disciple, and he's much older than her. And what type of relationship does he feel with her? Just out of curiosity. She was still a young girl. And we know that he had worshipped her as the Divine Mother also. He had worshipped her during the night of the Shodashi Puja, Falaharani Puja, as Shodashi, as a 16-year-old girl. Now, we have to remember that at the same time this is taking place, that Sri Ramakrishna's mother is living in the Nahabat upstairs, and Holy Mother is living downstairs. So he gave a beautiful answer. He said, the mother who is the deity in the temple, that means in the Kali temple, the mother who gave birth to me and now resides in the Nahabat. It is she who is now massaging my feet. I look upon you in that light as the embodiment of motherhood. So not just Holy Mother, but his own mother he looked upon in that light. As Chandramani got older, she got more and more senile and more simple in her old age. The one very nice example, there was a jute mill that was situated not too far from there, and at the end of lunchtime when the workers had to go back to work, there was some type of whistle that would blow. And Sri Ramakrishna's mother was convinced it was the blowing of the conch shell in Vaikuntha, signaling the time for Narayana and Lakshmi to eat. So she would never take food until she heard it. How could she take food before that Vishnu and his consort would have their food? So it became a big problem on Saturdays and Sundays, because there was no work and no whistle. So somehow they had to cajole her and convince her, no, mother, you didn't hear it, it went already and everything, so that she would take her food. In 1876, Chandramani, at that time, was 85 years old and still living in the Nahabat, Dakshineshwar. Her health began to fail, and Sri Ramakrishna had this presentiment that she wouldn't live much longer. He went to her every day. He would sit with her. He would chat with her. They would talk about the old days. He would do anything to cheer her up. So we can imagine how she looked forward to this every day, to that visit from Sri Ramakrishna. And sometimes he would give her some spiritual instructions and things. One morning, she didn't leave her room at her usual time. She used to get up around 8 o'clock. They carefully unlocked her door and found her at the point of death. So they did whatever they could for her. They saw that life was about to leave her. They took her to the bank of the Ganga. This is considered a very sacred and very auspicious place to die. And she was given water for 3 days until the final moment arrived. So it's a very beautiful scene. Sri Ramakrishna was by her side when she was taken to the banks of the Ganga. He made special offerings of flowers and tulsi leaves smeared with sandal paste at her feet. And in that state, she quietly passed away. Now, Thakur had already taken the vows of sannyasa, so it wasn't possible for him to do the Shraddha ceremony, the final funeral rites. He requested his nephew Ramlal to perform them. This is a common thing. If there's no son to do it, then nephew can do it. Even then, he felt some remorse. He felt, I should have done something. So there's something called tarpana. You take some water and you offer it. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, there was a strange phenomenon in his life that everything manifested in a very tangible, concrete way with him. So if it's really impossible for a sannyasin to do this type of ritual, for him it would be physically impossible. So we tried several times to pour water in his hands, but they would get stiff and the water would fall through the hands. So with tears in his eyes, he prayed to his mother, "Mother, I wanted to do this for you, but it simply wasn't possible." Now, we'll get to Swami Vivekananda, our strong Yati Raja, the king of sannyasins, who was actually a very soft-hearted mama's boy. His devotion to his mother far surpasses what we've seen so far, unmatched by any of the others. Bhuvaneshwari Devi was the name of his mother, and she was clearly the most important influence in the life of the young Narendra. His father, of course, was an influence on him. His father was very liberal, not so spiritually minded. One of the things we find very common in India is that the child will really learn religion on the lap of the mother. That is the mother who will recite stories from the great epics, Mahabharata, Ramayana, and everything, and that's how the children learn religion. There's no Sunday school that they go to. Father's busy with work and everything. So this was the case with Narendra, that he heard all of these stories about the Puranic stories and the stories of the great avatars and everything, from Ramayana, Mahabharata, from his mother. She was also a great devotee of Shiva. Now in her life also, she had to undergo a lot of tragedy, experience a lot of tragedy. She had given birth to a son first, who died, and then 3 daughters, and one of them also died. So there's no son. And in India, we've seen the role of the son is so important because he's the one who stays in the family and looks after the family, and then can, of course, continue the family line. So she prayed very fervently to Shiva and would fast every Monday. They had an old aunt that lived in Benares. So she requested this aunt to go to make offerings to Vireshwara Shiva. And she was convinced that it was through the grace of Shiva that the son was born to her, Narendra. Now, Narendra, I mentioned his grandfather, who had become a sannyasin. His name was Durga Prasad. And many people thought, the old people in the family who remembered what he looked like, thought that Narendra resembled him, and they wanted him to be named Durga Prasad. But Swamiji's mother looked into his eyes for some time in silence and said, no, he'll be named Vireshwar, because it was through the offerings at the Vireshwara Shiva temple, and he'll be called Bile for short. Only later he was given the name Narendra. Again, we find that the father dies, and it causes a great crisis within the family. In Swamiji's case, they went overnight from being a very prosperous, well-to-do family with a big house, something like 50 family members, big joint family. They've completely renovated his house. It's very beautiful. Whoever goes to Kolkata should go and visit Swamiji's house. Almost overnight, from that very prosperous family to abject poverty, because they hadn't realized that Swamiji's father had given so much money away to all of his relatives, who mostly wasted it and just depended upon him, didn't do any work at all. And even after receiving so much from him, felt that now this was their house. And there wasn't even room for the others. There was no money for them. So they were really in a very dire straits. And this poor Narendra, who was still a college student, had to go from place to place looking for some type of job so the family wouldn't starve. How hard-hearted his relatives were. It's hard to imagine, but this was the condition. So this fell on his shoulders, full responsibility, and we know the love for his mother and how much it must have pained him. He had younger siblings also there that, no chance of them working or anything. He was the only one who could have earned some type of money for them. So this tremendous feeling of obligation and burden to look after the family. Well, on the other hand, Sri Ramakrishna was there. And the burden for starting the monastic order and spreading the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna throughout the world was pulling him from the other side. So we can imagine the tremendous turmoil in his mind, and how he had to fulfill both sides. And even after becoming a monk living in Baranagar, how he had to give up his garua and put on Western clothes and go to court because the court case was still going on. How painful it must have been for him. So he's caught here between the either not fulfilling this great desire of Sri Ramakrishna, or having to watch his family suffer so much. Of course, Thakur had blessed them that they would never want for simple food and clothing and everything. So he felt that through Thakur's grace that they wouldn't starve to death or anything. But still, this was a tremendous weight on his shoulders, and on some level, a little bit of guilt was there. And throughout his life after that, he always felt that he hadn't been able to fulfill this responsibility to his family, especially to his mother. So we see that even when he was wandering, penniless and spending all of his time in spiritual practice and everything, still this thought of his mother was always there. And how at different times he would approach different people, especially we'll see Maharaja of Khetri. But this was always on his mind, and when we read his letters, even how he spoke about his mother to the disciples in the West, we get a glimpse of all of this. When we go through the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, and we see some of the recorded conversations and reminiscences, etc., we see how often he spoke about his mother. I'll read just a few of these things. He said, "It was my mother who inspired me to this, to lead the spiritual life. Her character was a constant inspiration to my life and work. The love which my mother gave to me has made me what I am, and I owe a debt to her that I can never repay. I believe whatever religious culture I have, I owe to that. It was consciously that my mother brought me into the world to be what I am. Whatever little good impulse I have was given to me by my mother, and consciously, not unconsciously." So this was always in the back of Swamiji's mind, that what can he do for his mother? Before going to the West, he spent a lot of time in Khetri and became very close with this Maharaj of Khetri, who actually became his disciple, even though they were more or less the same age. He played a very important role. Swamiji stayed there longer than any other place during his travels in India. It's in Rajasthan, not far from Delhi, just south, a little southwest of Delhi. And they both died at the age of 39. The Maharaj of Khetri just before Swamiji did. So Swamiji had 3 separate visits there. This Maharaj of Khetri was probably the one who encouraged Swamiji to keep the name Vivekananda, because he traveled with different names, Vivedishananda, Satchidananda. He didn't want people to follow him and know where he was, so he was used the different names at different times. And possibly he also was the one who held by the robes and cloth and things that Swamiji wore when he went to the West. And there are many nice letters written back and forth between them. Swamiji confided in him his concerns for his mother. And this Maharaj of Khetri, who would have done anything for Swamiji, he agreed to send 100 rupees every month to Swamiji's mother. And he did that until his very untimely death. He fell, or some people think was even pushed, maybe, off the roof of a building when it was under construction. Another interesting fact is M. I mentioned during our gospel class how M and Narendra, even though there was an age difference of 4 or 6 years, something like that, were very close, and that M very secretly gave money to Swamiji's mother and said to her, "Please don't ever tell him, otherwise he'll never look at me again, and he won't accept that money." So M was also helpful that way. And Mrs. Bull, there were others who were also, they knew of Swamiji's love for his mother, so they did whatever they could for her. Once while Swamiji was traveling in South India, he had a dream, a very vivid type of dream, and it disturbed his mind very much. He dreamt that his mother had died. Now, Swamiji was not a superstitious person. He usually didn't pay attention to dreams and things like that, but this disturbed him so much that he sent a wire to Calcutta to find out if it was true. But nobody wanted to wait. They saw how disturbed he was, so that Alasinga, Swamiji's disciple, and some others, they found a fortune teller. And this fortune teller, and this was in Chennai, Madras, this fortune teller was really known to be quite good at these types of things. And he met Swamiji, and Swamiji tested him. And he gave all of the right answers. He knew all about Swamiji's ancestors and family members and everything. whatever questions were put to him, he seemed to have all the right answers. He assured him that his mother was fine. And only after that was he willing, because this was before he was going to the West. He was willing to travel to the West when he was assured that his mother was okay. There's a nice letter that Swamiji wrote to the Haridas Haridas Desai. He was one of the high-placed ministers in Gujarat, and he had gone to visit Swamiji's mother in Calcutta. So it wasn't any secret. Swamiji wasn't, because sannyasins don't usually talk about their mothers like that. But anyhow, he wrote, "Dear Dewanji Sahib, your last letter reached me a few days ago. You had been to see my poor mother and brothers. I'm glad you did. But you have touched the only soft place in my heart. You ought to know, Dewanji, that I am no hard-hearted brute. If there is any being I love in the whole world, it is my mother." And when Swamiji in the West, after his great success of the Parliament of Religions, there were all these rumors that came up. That there were people who resented his success, and there were different rumors that he was a cheat and he was a fraud. See, Swamiji was studying for his law exams. So they spread this rumor that he was just a lawyer. And when he was in the Brahmo Samaj, they used to put on these plays, where they would act the roles of holy people and this and that. It was part of their religious tradition there. So the rumor was spread that he was an actor on the stage. That meant not a real monk. So Swamiji said, "I don't care what people think. Let them say anything. But the only thing that hurts me is if this news gets back to my poor mother, that how she'll feel if she hears all of these things." When Swamiji came back to India for the first time, after his first trip, the first thing he did was to see his mother. He went there, he bowed before her, and he laid his head on her lap just like a small child. Swamiji used to say when he came back, especially after the second trip, that he had done everything that he wanted to do. His work was done. Even after the first trip, he took all of his money, he gave it to Swami Brahmananda. He said, "Now it's yours. I'm turning everything over to you. You'll be our first president. I want to remove myself. I want to spend my remaining years in quiet and solitude." So he was satisfied that the movement was on good footing. He used to say, "My machinery is running nicely," that nothing would prevent it from growing and flourishing. But he wanted to see his mother settle down in her own house. He wanted her to have her own place so that she wouldn't have to depend on anyone else. He wrote to Sarah Bull, one of his very close disciples, and a very, very helpful person, not just monetarily, but she was almost the only one in the West that Swamiji really would seek advice from on practical issues and things. So he had a very close relationship with her. He wrote to Sarah Bull, "It is becoming clearer to me that I lay down all concerns of the mutt and for a time go back to my mother. She has suffered much through me. I must try to smooth her last days. Do you know this is exactly what the great Shankaracharya himself had to do?" So this was one desire. He had two final desires, to find a place for his mother. The second was to fulfill the desire of the mother to see some of the holy places in India, especially in East Bengal and Assam. So they visited he took her to these places. One place is called Langulband. Another Chandranath, this little hill that you climb with the Shiva temple. Kamakya and Shillong in Assam. I made a point, my first visit to Bangladesh, to visit all of the places that Swamiji went to. And he also had some desire to take his mother to Rameshwaram in South India, but that was never fulfilled. One other thing I'll mention, because I read it just recently. I have a very bad habit of reading things and telling myself that I'll remember where I read it and all the details of it, and then I forget. but I remember the gist of it. So I may get the details a little bit wrong, but the incident was that a young monk had come to join the order, and I believe under Mahapurush Maharaj, because I know that Mahapurush Maharaj was one of those monks who would tell the young monks, go visit your family. Now, not all of the monks are like that. Many of the monks of our order are more orthodox, and some never went back to their home. But he was not like that. He would tell them to go back and visit from time to time, make sure they're okay. So anyhow, this monk had come to join, but something happened. Either his father died or his mother fell ill, I don't remember what, and he was the only son, I believe. So he was sent back to look after his mother, and then arrangements were made for him to join the order in Kashi, in Varanasi, where we have our Seva Ashram. There's a big hospital there, and there's a Advaita Ashram there. Two centers are there. But there's also a place where older devotees can come and retire. So they made arrangements for his mother to live there and for him to join there. Highly unorthodox. But this is my point. Our order has this special reverence somehow for mothers, even the mothers of monks, that way. Now, the one thing we can't forget, and that's our Holy Mother, because the Holy Mother became the mother for the entire organization, the Sangha Janani, we call her. All of the monks of the orders feel a special relationship with the Holy Mother, that she's also, just as our biological mother is our mother, she's also our mother of the monastic order. And perhaps because of the important role that Holy Mother played, perhaps this is the reason why the special reverence for motherhood is there within the Ramakrishna order. Now, I just will end by saying that I also have my special love and reverence for my own mother, who through Thakur's grace is still well, about to, God willing, to celebrate her 96th birthday. And the debt that I owe to her is equal to the debt that Swamiji owed to his mother. So this talk is also dedicated to my own mother. So to all of you out there, I wish you a very, very happy Mother's Day, and may Thakur Ma and Swamiji, may they shower their blessings on all of us.